Hey guys, so for today's video I was going to show you everything that I read in June, because since it's the end of June. It's actually the 30th while I'm filming this, so I might get a few more books in, but probably won't. The first book that I read this month was A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the third book of the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and it's where Feyre is no longer living with the Night Court. She is back with the Spring Court, and she is being a little spy for them. I loved this series. Every time I say series, my Siri goes off. But I love this series. I didn't think it was as great as people were hyping it up to be, but I did really like it. I'm not going to go like too in depth with these books because I have a whole month to do. The next book I read was In Watermelon Sugar, which I still haven't rated this book because I still am not sure as to how I feel about it or like what really happened. In Watermelon Sugar, it's basically about the town of Ideth and how everything is made out of watermelon sugar. We don't really know what that's about. I don't really know how I feel about this book, to be completely honest, and I wish I loved it. Maybe that's why I haven't rated it, is because I wanted to love it and I just didn't. I don't know if I just am not smart enough to fully comprehend what is going on. Which, like, it's not like a hard read. It's just one of those that you feel like something deeper is going on, but like you just can't put your finger on it. And the next book that I read was You Lost Me, Why Young Christians Are Leaving Church and Rethinking Faith. I had to read it for one of my Bible classes, and I thought it was interesting, and I can see all the points that they make. They go into research and onto like why all the younger people, like my age and what, are leaving the church. I feel like they made a lot of good points, but it was a little too sciencey for me. Not that I want it to be more faith-based, but like it was more of, here's all the information, and like they just kind of hand it to you. I'm like, what do I do with this? Our next book, which is Thinking with Type, a critical guide for designers, writers, editors, and students, which was also a book that I had to read for class, but it was already like on my TBR shelf, so I was like, this is great. I don't even have to read a book that I don't want to read. It tells about like the history a little bit of graphic design and different ways that you can think about going with projects, and like how you set up your text can affect the feeling that the viewer has, etc. So it was a quick read, but it took me forever to read it, considering I graduated in August and I finished it in June. No, I graduated in May and finished it in June. After that, I read Blood and Honey, which is the second book to Serpent and Dove. I thought it was good, but I liked the first book better. It may have been just because I waited so long to read the second book. I had to wait to get it. Also, the first book I listened to the audiobook, which I think helped so much because it is based in France, and so they use French words and like they all have French names. So it's just a little bit easier to like fully understand. Next book I read was Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones, which I gave this book 5 stars. If you are to read a self-help book, this is the one that you should read, because I think it's smart and it's not like stating the same 5 or so tips that everybody has in their books, you know? I felt like it had a little bit of a different angle to it, which you may read this and think, like this sounds just like all the other self-help books, but I feel like this one was different, and I feel like there was a lot of things I was like, yeah, I could try doing that. So the next few books are actually from my Dollar Tree book challenge. So if you've read that one, or if you go watch that, you can get a little bit more detail about these books. So the first one was Rule by Ellen Goodlett, and it's about 3 girls that are trying to get the crown after they just found out that they are next in line for the throne, basically. They have to figure out who is going to be the best one, because they grew up not knowing that the king was actually their father, and the only legitimate child that this king had just was killed. So, it's a good read, but it's very like reminiscent of Wattpad style writing, which is kind of this nostalgia just hit. I highly suggest if you are in a reading slump and you just want something fun to read. The next book that I read was also in that video, which was Awayland stories, and these are really good actually. There are little stories inside this one book that kind of combine fantasy with today society. Like the first story, for example, is a Cyclops that is joining a dating app, and he's like filling out a little questionnaire. I think it's funny. There was some stories that I felt like could have been left out, but overall, pretty good. Next book was actually not with that video. This was another book that I read for school, which I didn't really read it for school. They put it on our like list of books to buy, and then they completely took it off of our schedule without telling any of us, and I had already bought the book, so I decided to read it anyways, which is Culture Making, Recovering Our Creative Calling by Andy Crouch. I think this is a really good book. If you are a Christian and you like the creative world, like if you have a creative job, like I went for graphic design, so this was an interesting read to see how it's basically about how Christians are part of the culture and should be creating more culture, and not, you can't really be away from said culture. It took me a while to read because I just kept on getting in and out of the habit of wanting to read it. Like it was fun, and then I got into a little bit of reading slump, and then I was like, I don't really want to read this anymore. The next book was also in that Dollar Tree video, and it's The Game of Hope. It's about the stepdaughter of Napoleon Bonaparte, and she lives in a boarding school with girls, and she's getting to that time of her life where she needs to start looking for guys, but it doesn't really have a lot of a love story. It's more about friendship and family, and it is a really cute read. I highly recommend. And I actually learned a lot about French history with this, so that I did not know about before. It was cute. I loved it. I rated it as a 4 out of 5 stars just because it didn't have as much romance as I would like. Like, I know back then they didn't, like, hold hands or anything. That would be scandalous. But I just felt like he could have been in the story more, which she doesn't even end up with that guy, like, in actual history. Like, she ends up with her stepfather's brother. That's more scandalous than hand-holding to me, but okay. The next book I read was Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life, and Maybe the World. I thought that this book was cute. I felt like it had some good points. Like, the story is written by a Navy SEAL, so we get a little bit insight on, like, the Navy training and, like, their lifestyle, which I found really interesting. I feel like if he just wrote a memoir or something instead of a self-help book, maybe like sprinkled self-help into it, that would be like a better book. I listened to the audiobook, so maybe if I actually read it, I would have liked it a little better. I feel like audiobooks can be hit or miss depending on the narrator, which the narrator that I listened to was actually the writer, and so he was very like Navy voice, which made it very formal feeling. I don't know. I also read this one for the Dollar Tree video, and it is All Our Wrong Todays. Terrible. I'm sorry. That was mean. I gave it a 1 star, though, which I don't have many 1 stars. I think I have like 2. I just didn't like it. The writing was The writer just told us everything instead of showing it. I feel like the author thought that the readers were not smart enough to comprehend what was actually going on. And there was quite a bit of sus behavior going on. The main character time travels into the past, and ends up changing the future. And so he's currently in the present time, but in a different dimension. And the body that he takes over, he's like looking back at the memories and he's like, wow, this guy was really misogynistic. And I'm like, okay, but like you were back in your life also, so like both of y'all were. There's just so many things that I was like, I don't really like this. But the last book that I read was How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, which is the 3.5 book of the Cruel Prince series. Loved it. This series was just amazing. I feel like normally people are like one way or the other for this book. Either everybody loves it or everybody hates it. I loved it. But like normally with enemies to lovers, you're like, they're gonna end up together. But this one I was like, are they? Because he was genuinely mean to her sometimes. But I loved it. And like everything made sense as to why he was being mean. Like I didn't feel like there was that many plot holes. How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories is basically like his side of everything that happened, like, but it's not just about like the books that we just read. Like, it is not the Twilight version, you know, what's it called? Where like it's all apparently Edward's thoughts on the last like 2 years that they were actually together. They were only together for like 2 years, and they thought they were like in love. Shouldn't Edward know that only 2 years is not that much time? I don't even think it was 2 years. Anyways, where was I going? How Carden grows up and he comes to hate all these stories because he was the center of most of the stories, that he was going to be a bad king and all that. This is a very bad explanation, but I have like 12% left and I'm scared my camera's going to die on me, so I can't think. I feel like if you didn't want to read the other books, this might be an okay... No, you would be completely lost. No. Highly recommend the Cruel Prince series if you haven't tried it yet. And to show you what I'm currently reading is The Catcher in the Rye. I probably will not finish it today. But those are my June reads. Hopefully you found something to add to your TBR pile. And with that being said, you should probably start reading. That pile isn't going to get any shorter. It's just going to keep on growing. So, bye!